Welcome, my friends, to another YouTube version of the BJJ Brick Podcast. I hope you enjoy the show, and if you do, please subscribe to the channel. So here we go.
Thank you for listening to the BJJ Brick Podcast. We'll be bringing you Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and good times. We hope to flatten your Jiu-Jitsu learning curve, help you get the most out of your grappling ability, and meet your goals both on and off the mat.
Welcome back, my friends, to episode 157 of the BJJ Brick Podcast. I'm Gary, and I got my partner in crime, my tap-out specialist, Byron Jabara, with me. How are you, Byron?
Doing great, Gary. I'm an expert in tapping out. I've been doing that for many years and getting better at it, you know, Gary.
Yeah, I think I probably do have a black belt in tapping out. Probably pretty good at that.
Today we have a interview with Peter Daniel, Jiu-Jitsu Medic, and he's got a website, jiu-jitsumedic.wordpress.com. Check it out. One of the big things, I don't think we even mentioned in the interview, but tapping out before you get, injured is a great idea.
Definitely a great idea. And, sometimes you can't. Sometimes it happens during a scramble or whatever, but you can definitely lessen your chances if you check your ego at home, tap out quick. And, hopefully the more time you're on the mat, the more time you're going to get, or the better you're going to get. The more time you can train, you're going to get better. If you're hurt all the time, you're not going to be on the mat as much. You may have won a tournament because you didn't tap, but your arm's destroyed and you won't be able to train for a long time. But, tapping is not bad. Tapping, Gary, a lot of times will save you. Yes.
I got a new person tip here.
A new person tip.
Yep.
What do we got?
Well, it happens. I only see new people doing it, and typically, talking with a new person, getting on the mat with them, and just trying to introduce them to the game and the sport, the martial art. When I tap them out, it's a lot of times it's a real soft tap with the fingers, and they're just like got me, just kind of tapping me gently, and I stop them. I say, okay, I felt you tapping me, but that's not how you want to tap out. You want to make a deliberate, smacking against my body somewhere, not on the mat unless you can't. And if it is on the mat, you say tap as well. You have to you want to be as safe as you can. Say me feeling you gently touch my leg as I'm cranking on your shoulder or your arm or whatever. It is not the kind of safety mechanism you want to do. You want me to for sure feel you tapping so I can let go immediately. You don't want to put it into me not having that adrenaline rush to where I don't feel it. So if you're fairly new, this is common for people, with very, very, usually in the first couple of rolls, they figure out I need to tap harder. This is getting kind of crazy, but tap to where they know it. You're not admitting anything other than, hey, I want to be safe. That's the main thing. You got to tap in a fashion that communicates that you're done. I don't know how flexible your shoulder is or anything like that. So when you're done, make it deliberate. You could say tap as well, but tap on the person, tap on them fairly hard, and keep yourself safe. And I see that a lot with new people. They kind of don't want to do that. They don't want to tap very hard.
Yeah, that is a good tip. I really didn't think about that, but you are right. A lot of times you do get that soft tap. And, I think about sometimes where somebody's got a really tight arm bar with me, and all of a sudden my grip breaks. The minute my grip breaks, I'm tapping and I'm tap, 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 really loud. And, hey, there's no shame in it. I know I'm done. And, I was thinking of, I was rolling the other day and somebody had a really tight high S mount on me and, had my leg or my arm, basically trapped. And basically as soon as my grip broke, the guy didn't even have his grip yet. He was going to go for a kind of like a Kimura arm bar. And, I tapped already. It's like, I'm not getting out of this. You broke my grip, which is my last line of defense. I know I'm done. I'm just going to tap. It ain't worth, it ain't worth it. I'm not getting out.
Yeah.
So, nothing wrong against tapping. Just, you definitely want to be safe, but make sure your partner knows, make sure the referee knows, and, tap hard, tap loud. Sometimes like Byron said, you don't have any arms. Both your arms are caught. The worst is when your arms are caught and like the guy's torso is over your mouth and you can't even breathe and you're trying to tap with your leg. But You gotta find some appendage to tap with.
Tapping is a safety mechanism that lets us do this for more than a week. That's really all it is. I don't know who had Gary in that mount. I guarantee you, it wasn't this guy. It wasn't me. I don't end up there with Gary. But tap before you get injured. We got with the interview, we've got a lot of great topics to cover: cauliflower ear, skin infections, and
basically stuff you're going to run into the mat. Those are, skin infections. You see that all the time. Cauliflower ear, that's a big topic in your gym. So stuff we're going to run into, and Peter Daniel is definitely going to help us out with that.
Yeah.
So you definitely don't want to miss this show, and you don't want to miss any shows. So the best way to not miss a show is get onto our email list. I know we say this every week, but check out the link on the show notes to our email list, and we will send you out a link each and every week. We've never missed a week for the show.
There we go. It's good to have people join us over the email, and all the links will be there easy for you. Gary, another thing we're doing here is we are collecting submissions. Not your typical armbar submission, but a submission.
Oh, I was just getting ready to tap.
For a Coach of the Year. If you believe that you have a great coach and you would like to share that with the jiu-jitsu community, write up a little essay, send it to bjjbrick@gmail.com, put in the subject line Coach of the Year, and we will collect these together and create a little panel of people to read them and to vote on them. We're looking for somebody who's just a great person in the community. Any way your coach has kind of gone above and beyond a typical coaching role and helped you out or helped out your team or something that really stands out. It doesn't, the coach doesn't need to be the coach for a bunch of world champions. A normal person, normal gym, and and just a great story of somebody who is a great person in our community that we'd like to honor by the end of the year. So we're looking for Coach of the Year. If you think it might be yours, if you love your coach and you want to help out the gym, maybe this would be a little bit of great publicity that they could talk about. Send in your essay to bjjbrick@gmail.com. Put in Coach of the Year as a subject line.
Yep. Hey, speaking of Coach of the Year, we always ask for reviews, on Stitcher or iTunes. Definitely put a review in there. But we also, last year we started the funniest review of the year, and Nathan Hadley won that. So basically, if you send a review there too, we're going to, at the end of the year, me and Byron will look and see what one we think is the funniest, and we'll have our second annual funniest one of the year. But the reason I bring that out is we did have a review from Stitcher. From Sir Laugh-A-Lot 26. I assume he's 26 years old. The title of his review is I'm Addicted to the BJJ Brick Podcast. He says, I love this podcast. I work graveyards, and I've been listening basically nonstop for about a month now, ever since I discovered it. I shared it with my new friends. I'm making in BJJ. It's endlessly entertaining, and there's great information from people who wish to improve their game. They interview world champions, Olympians, and inspirational people of all levels in their BJJ journeys. I've had such a good time listening that I've downloaded iTunes just to put in a review, and I haven't used iTunes ever since my iPod was sent back to me in warranty stating that it was customer-induced damage. He must have been rolling and rolled over his iPod there, which I have to agree with. I beat the poop out of this thing. But still, if they had sent me a refurbished replacement, then it's likely that I would use several more Apple products in the future. But I chose to go with the discontinued Zune, Microsoft version of the iPad later in life. I want to make this funny, but I think trying to be funny is hard for people who try too hard to. So that one will definitely make it in there.
He totally went totally off topic and started talking about his experience with customer service with Apple and all this stuff.
But it's awesome. I like that. And the cool thing is that's a great for the Zune. That's a great advertisement. So, he turned it into a couple different things.
Wow. Very, very amazing. Yeah. I'm reading this. I'm like, that's a nice review. And he starts talking about the ward team. Like, what in the world is he? And it goes on and on. And half the reviews about his experience with their customer service and fill it in. If you want to write a funny review for the podcast, do it on Stitcher or iTunes, wherever you listen to your podcasts. And send us an email about that so we actually see it. This happened a little while ago. We missed it. But send us an email bjjbreak@gmail.com, and let us know you wrote a funny review. We'll put you in the queue for funniest review of the year. And glad to have this one here added to the list. So this is good stuff, my friend.
Yep. Hey, I'd also like to give a shout out to our Patreon supporters, Alexander, Greggy, Sean, and Rob. These guys are big supporters of the BJJ Brick podcast. I mean, we couldn't keep the show rolling like we do each and every week without those guys. So thank you so much. We appreciate it.
Yep. And it's easy to become a Patreon supporter if you like to help out the show. Check out the links in the show notes. And I also, I work graveyards. I've been listening for nonstop about a month now. Pretty spooky working a graveyard near Halloween here, Gary.
Yeah, I wonder if the good thing though, he trains jiu-jitsu, so maybe that works on ghosts.
There you go.
We did talk about that last week.
Yeah, I would think there would be something you could do, but ghosts are pretty transparent and just hard to get a hold of.
Well, you imagine once you do get a hold of them, how hard your pressure's got to be. So I guarantee you, Sir Laugh-A-Lot 26 has great pressure from side control.
That's true. Something that's not hard to get a hold of would be our audio book, Your First Year in BJJ, where I'm going to talk to you for about 2.5 hours and walk you through all the stuff you might encounter your first year and really help you get through that time and help you get on to future success on the mats. But you really have to get past that first week, first month, first year in order to get this really incorporated as a part of your life. So if you are in that first year and you want to latch on and get the most out of that, I hope this audiobook helps out. It's $11.99, and the proceeds go to help out the show. Gary, I've got a quote from a little bit of a different source. I was just searching quotes and health and that sort of thing, kind of looking at our, have the Jiu-Jitsu Medic here today. And I found a quote by Joyce Meyer. Joyce says, "I believe the greatest gift you can give your family in the world is a healthy you." And that's an interesting thing to say. I'm reminded of like you're in the airplane, and they lose pressure and you're going to run out of oxygen in the air because it's too thin, and the mask drop down, and they say put your mask on first, and then you can help somebody else with theirs, including your loved one that you care more about than yourself. But you first got to take care of yourself so you could do that. So you have to be healthy. A healthy you lets you do things for other people. So just how important that health is, and how much I know in jiu-jitsu it seems like sometimes it doesn't promote health. I'm all banged up and stuff like that. But really, if you do it correctly and you take our advice on tapping and training smart, jiu-jitsu, I know for me, has made me a lot healthier.
Yeah. It's kind of funny we talk about jiu-jitsu and health, but don't you think like jiu-jitsu and wrestler guys and MMA guys, probably the toughest guys in the world. I hear all the time, it's like, yeah, I just dislocated 4 ribs, but I'm just going to sit out this round and I'll be back next round. Yeah, I tore my ACL. I'm going to take a week off and then I'll be back next week. My neck's messed up. I can't even lift my neck. I have to look straight down, but I'm going to keep rolling. We got some of the toughest guys in the world in this sport.
Yeah, that's true. But I'm not, I know, and you're the same as me, Gary, I'm not advocating that. We're advocating not getting hurt. But we do get to see, bear witness to plenty of people doing things that are just amazing and having the toughness. But really, I always think if I can't train tomorrow the way I train today because of an injury, I'm not training very, very smart. So, you got to get back on the mat tomorrow or as soon as you can. You don't want your injuries to limit that. So, be a healthy version of you. And then off the mat, you could do whatever you want. If I'm reminded also of times when you're sick, you get the flu or whatever,
you don't want to give it to your teammates. Yep. And you don't want to give it to your teammates.
That's true.
Yep.
Stay home.
Yep.
This is flu season, Gary. So if you're sick and feeling like you probably shouldn't be on the mat, you probably should stay home and then give it a day or two afterwards even to get rid of that stage where you can still give it to other people and not even have it. So
yeah. Yep. And then also, eating well, rest, all that, goes into the healthy you. So it's a lifestyle, and jiu-jitsu is part of that. There's your exercise and your mind, clearing out your mind. Good for the mind and the body.
There you go. Good for it all, Gary.
Hey, we got an awesome article, kind of a different article this week. It's from a guy named Eric Beyer, Beyer. And, we're talking about journals, and we know we've talked about journals before. But, he's got got an article. It's called Journal Your Training and Journey from October 3rd, and it's ericbeyer.com. He's got his own website there, own journal. But, the great thing about this one is he's talking about a product, and he gets nothing from this product. The product's called Evernote. And, he's talking about how he uses it for journaling. And, a lot of people just who journal just use a pad and a paper. And, there's nothing wrong with that. But what I like is, this is what I saw. If you look over to the right of the article, Eric talks about him and talks about himself. And, he talks about how he's a VP of sales for a company. He says he keeps his plate full with web design products. He does Boy Scouts with his sons, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. He's got to spend quality time with his wife. And then on the side, I own a glue company. And then he says, I offer website hosting, design, SEO, and marketing, a Google reseller for emails for businesses. And I'm sitting there thinking, man, and he talks about how he does photography too. And I'm like, man, how's this guy got time to train? He says he trains 3 mornings a week, plus tries to get in 2 days at night, and does as well at jiu-jitsu as he does. And, he talks about how he started in January 2015 and just got his blue belt after winning the Dallas IBJJF Open. And, so it's not only that he does all that, he trains, and he's pretty darn good. And I'm like, how the heck does he have time, with all this in his life? And a lot of us run into that. And see, that's what I like about his article. He talks about a thing called Evernote, and I had never heard of it, but Byron actually uses it. He knew about it. But what I like is he introduced me to a new app and something that makes your life easier, just makes basically condenses everything, makes it easier for you to keep the journal, and for somebody who's really busy, and that's kind of what I got out of the article there. It's just we're all going to be busy, but if there's a way to make my life simpler, to make it easier to keep a journal, I got a better chance of keeping it, which in turn is going to allow me to get a little bit better at jiu-jitsu.
Yeah, and so you mentioned a little bit about Eric. He's a fan of the show, and he's also some of the tech support behind the show. Gary, all this wires and stuff coming out of my computer and software and things like that, it's a struggle sometimes for me to understand this. And fairly recently, I had to send him a message. Yeah. It's like, okay, dude, so I'm confused. So it feels good to have Eric out there, and he'll very very quickly he's like, yeah, here's let me see if I can help you out. And that's a feeling of great support in the community that we have here with Eric, and he wrote this, and I was like reading it, and I have Evernote. I like Evernote. It's an app that I use to keep track of things, and I need to start using it to journal. So I downloaded. Eric made a kind of a template for your journal, and it starts off like it has a class, gi or no gi, and it has like a little checkbox. You click on that. So you download Evernote if you don't have it already, although it's one of the most popular apps out there, Gary. I don't know why you don't have it, but so you download this template, and it goes right in there, and then it has like, starts off with drills, what kind of drills do you do, techniques, who you rolled with, that sort of thing, and it just allows you to keep track of kind of how class was that day, and it really doesn't take more than a couple of minutes to fill this thing out. So you could do it, when you get home after your shower, don't forget the shower, or you could do it before you leave class, whatever. Just if you can make it a habit, you can kind of keep track. He knows how many classes he's attended, and he even has like different tap out things that happen. Like I'd be interested to know if I get caught, and I think I do get caught in Kimuras quite a bit more than chokes and that sort of thing. So I'd be interested to see usually when I tap, it's to a Kimura, or usually when I get if I get a submission, it's gonna be this. I can probably figure that out pretty good myself, but because I'm only working on a couple things, but it would be interesting to kind of see trends develop over time, kind of keep track of your training. And I know that keeping a journal like this also could be a motivating thing. You don't want to have a whole week go by without a journal entry. So I think that this is also a thing to look at for motivation.
Yeah, and he talks about a couple of the benefits of it. And first of all, you asked Gary, I don't know why you don't have it. And I'm not a tech guy. I am very far from being a tech guy. I'm clueless. So I actually need somebody to actually put this down and put a hyperlink for me, explain why it works and dumb it down, basically dumb it down for me. But what I liked also is, he did the like you said, the BJJ template. Something that it's probably easy to do, but I'm not that intelligent and stuff like that. I need a shortcut. I need something like that. He's basically held my hand and set that up for me. But then, what I really liked about the benefits is versus the old school journal, and buy a journal and handwrite everything, is I can access my notes, on any device and computer. Also, most people have a smartphone. You can get an app for your smartphone, or let's say I'm visiting somewhere, and I'm not training. I'm on vacation, and hopefully I train on vacation. But let's just say I don't. I can get on any computer. Just about any house or hotel can have a computer if I don't have my phone with me, and I can get on it via my web browser, so I can go back and check everything out. But the other good thing is kind of like what you said. You do get to go back and see what you're getting caught in more often. Like you're sitting there thinking, I get caught in Kimuras much more than I do in chokes, and it'd be kind of cool just to really see if that's true or not. Because you probably don't keep track of it right now. But if you did, you could go back and at the end of the year say, man, I got caught in 67 Kimuras, but only 7 chokes. And, I just think that would help you work on your game, make a goal, a short-term or long-term goal for the, next year.
Yeah, and the way this template is, it wouldn't be very hard at all to customize this. For me, it'd be hard. Really, this whole thing is super easy. Go to his website on your phone. He has a link to Evernote that you can download it right there, and then he also has a link to his journal, which on my phone I opened it up with Evernote and I just saved it to a file. So it was pretty quick and easy. Gary, I can help you out. But he's got a thing that says, your roles. He wants, if you want to document your roles, do that. If you don't, that's fine too. But you might just document how many times you roll or who it's with or whatever. But, I would be curious in documenting, how many times I do a certain guard pass, and that sort of thing. And to see, if I'm able to guard pass pull this guard pass off on a purple belt, for a month or two, and then finally I start getting browns and blacks, or I don't know. It's just kind of neat to track that over time, and you really can't do that. You just have a gut feeling unless you actually document it and look at the data, and this is a great way to do that. So, I think this is a thing that more people, to be honest, we're just lazy about our training. We want to go train, we want to have fun, and enjoy it. But if you want to get serious about this, think if you were a professional at this, there's no excuse to not document how your training's going and what you're working on, and just keep track of things. So it part of it's maybe motivation, part of it if you want to take this more seriously, this would be a good way to do that and to tell yourself that this is a serious thing, So definitely look into it.
Yeah. So like I said, I thought this was a little different article, but for me, I thought it was awesome, and I am going to download it, and I'm going to, download his template there too, and go from there. And I can see how it's going to make me better.
Yep. Gary, much like Eric is a tech support guy for me, I will go ahead and step up, and if you can't install Evernote or this template, let me know, and I can do that because it is pretty easy.
Yeah. But the good thing is, one of my good training partners that I train with a lot is a head of IT where I work at. So I also have that guy there too. And also I'd like to give that guy a shout out. He competed under the BJJ Brick banner. He doesn't really train anywhere, just trains with me on the side every now and then, and entered his first tournament. Actually even put the gi on and never was training the gi in his life. He just put that on to get some extra matches. But and actually finished second in the gi and first no gi. So I'd like to give a shout out to Blake there for his awesome performance.
Yeah, Blake, that's awesome. It's amazing, and is not surprised that somebody who's training under Gary hasn't had a gi on, but has the attitude that, hey, I'll give it a shot. It's a tournament. I'm already here. Might as well throw the gi on and roll. And good fundamentals. Gi and no gi, a lot of it works the same. Obviously he's not doing a lot of tricky stuff with the lapel, but he doesn't need that. He did very well. So proud of you, Blake, and thanks for being Gary's tech support guy.
Yep, and Blake, help me if I have trouble installing.
When you have trouble installing anything.
Yeah, when I have trouble. Help me install Evernote. So, see, that's what I do. I create friends in stuff that I'm bad at. And it's like, hey, I'll teach you a little jiu-jitsu if you help me out when I have computer issues. That works great.
That's a good thing to do, Gary.
Speaking of good things to do, Byron, I think it's time to get on with our BJJ Medic interview.
He is the most interesting grappler in the world. He has had a short career as a pharmacist. He got fired because he was recommending jiu-jitsu for 95% of his patients. His idea of a performance-enhancing drug is better technique. He has been tested for this, and the results were positive. Chuck Norris's wife has a tattoo of his face.
I don't always listen to podcasts, but when I do, I prefer the BJJ Brick podcast. Stay sweaty, my friends.
All right, my friends, I'm happy to bring Peter Daniel to the BJJ Brick podcast. Peter has a website called Jiu-Jitsu Medic. It is at jiu-jitsumedic.wordpress.com. Check it out. A lot of great information there, and I'm happy to have him here talking about jiu-jitsu and some medical sides of the mat. Welcome to the show, Peter.
Hi. Thank you for having me.
Thanks for being on here. We've got a couple of topics we have written down. We're going to talk about cauliflower ear, maybe some brain injuries and some skin infections. But first, could you just introduce yourself to the audience a little bit for us?
Okay. Hi, everyone. So my name is Peter. I'm a third-year medical student, and I study at the National University of Singapore. At the same time, I'm also an avid jiu-jitsu nerd. I'm a blue belt, and I train in a gym in Singapore called Impact Mixed Martial Arts.
Peter, why did you decide to take on learning jiu-jitsu while you're in medical school?
Well, I started jiu-jitsu before I was in medical school.
Okay.
I was serving my compulsory military service in Singapore, and I was looking for a way to exercise and also learn how to defend myself. So I had heard about jiu-jitsu while watching like the UFC and other MMA events, and I was like, why not give it a shot? So that's how I got started, and I never looked back.
I'm just curious, are there any other medical students that you train with there, or is it pretty much you go to medical school and that's one group, and then jiu-jitsu, it's a completely different group of people?
Yeah, it's a completely different group of people. I don't know anybody in medical school who does jiu-jitsu, so it's kind of just two separate worlds that I try to bridge using my blog.
Yeah, that's great that you're willing to share this information. I urge everybody, there'll be a link to it in the show notes to go by there, check out his blog. A lot of the stuff we're going to be talking about today will be on there in more detail. So okay. Peter, I think people, a lot of times when they start jiu-jitsu, are a little cautious. I know when I started jiu-jitsu, I bought a set of headgear that I don't know where that is, but I never really did wear it. We're worried about cauliflower ear. Can you maybe talk a little bit, just open up about what cauliflower is and how people get it?
Okay, so cauliflower ear is a permanent deformity of the ear, the outer ear, and it usually happens when a hematoma forms. So a hematoma is when there is blood trapped in an enclosed space. So when a hematoma forms in the outer ear and you do not drain it, what happens is that it will heal in a very disorganized fashion, and you'll end up having a very swollen ear that basically is rather unsightly. So where I come from in Singapore, wrestling isn't a big thing. So not many people know what cauliflower ear is, so it's kind of ugly. It's not like a badge of honor here. But I'll only be worried if I can literally see that a collection of blood has formed in my ear.
And how quickly does it happen?
Oh, it's usually instantaneous. So you'll find that after you've been hit in the ear or someone has been exerting a shearing kind of force against your ear, within a minute or so, because the skin has separated from the cartilage, it will fill with blood within like a minute or so. Yeah.
Okay, so it is similar to in MMA when you see somebody's face, like maybe a spot on the forehead is kind of swollen, a hematoma there. It's pretty quick, and a lot of times, around the eyes, they kind of swell shut in boxing. Mm-hmm. It's similar to that, but it's just on your ear. And ultimately, what happens to the cartilage in your ear that is not getting the proper blood flow?
Oh, so what happens is that the cartilage has a rather poor blood supply. So when you get a hematoma, there's this layer called the perichondrium, and it's responsible for supplying blood to the cartilage. So when you get a force exerted on the ear that separates the perichondrium from the cartilage, what happens is that the cartilage loses its blood supply, and this will cause it to eventually die, and the attempt to heal and build new cartilage will be very disorganized. So that's essentially what is happening when you see a hematoma.
So at first, when if your ear gets swollen and it is a hematoma, it's squishy. It's like blood in there, and then ultimately the ear does not remain squishy. It kind of hardens up.
Yep, it hardens up.
And is that a chunk of calcium inside your ear, or what is that?
It's actually just it's poorly formed cartilage.
That's what I meant to say, not calcium. You don't have a bone in your ear. Cartilage in your ear that's forming poorly because you've damaged the blood vessels. So how and when should this be treated?
Well, actually, as long as you see a hematoma, you should probably go get it treated because it won't drain by itself. So you probably should see the doctor as soon as you notice that there is a hematoma in your ear, because it's not going to drain itself. And if you just leave it there, what will happen is that the improper healing will occur and you end up getting that hardened ear that everyone dreads.
This may be hard to answer question, but how most doctors have no experience with grappling or even wrestling. But if I walk in there with cauliflower ear, are they going to know really how to treat that? Is that something that is general knowledge, or maybe they just look and do a little research and, I got to drain it? Is that pretty easy for them to do?
Well, I think it really depends on where you're at. So I'm not sure about how it is in the US, because I think wrestling is a big thing over there, right? So are the doctors usually familiar with hematomas there?
I think with cauliflower ear specifically, they are always, how'd you do this? Tell me about it. And they are interested because it's fairly unique for them. They see broken arms and infections and things like that. But cauliflower ear probably doesn't walk in the door every day for the average doctor here in the U.S. But they treat it fine.
Yeah, I think it's exactly the same thing here in Singapore. So, for example, I think none of my medical student friends know a lot about cauliflower ear. It's simply not taught in school because it's such a strange injury. It doesn't really happen very often. So I think you might be in a situation where the doctor will be unfamiliar with it. And maybe it can help if you can explain to them how you got the injury, and you can tell them, look, this happens a lot in my sport. It's actually a hematoma in my ear, and if you don't drain it, what's gonna happen is I'm gonna get cauliflower ear. Actually, if you explain it that way, I think most doctors will appreciate it, and they'll if they don't know how to treat it, I'm sure they'll be able to read it up. So it always helps to tell the doctor how you got the injury and what you know about it.
Yeah, that's one good thing, because I always I feel bad for my dog when it's sick because I can't tell my doctor what's wrong. But you should share that knowledge with your doctor for sure, what you were doing, what you think it is, because you probably have, even just listening to this, you have a better grasp on it than a lot of doctors. So give them that advantage to help yourself out. So if let's say I'm grappling right now and I notice some swelling in my ear, a couple hours later, I'm in front of a doctor. What's likely to happen from that point?
Well, okay, so again, when you see the doctor, usually when you suffer an injury in a sport, they'll usually do some form of general assessment, because they are afraid that you might have been hit on the head. So they'll probably still do a general sort of assessment to see if there's any damage to your brains or to your nerves. So once they determine that's pretty much clear, they will probably proceed by telling you that they'll need to drain it. So the way they'll do it is that they usually will use a needle. And the good thing about visiting a doctor is that they can give you some form of local anesthesia to help you with the pain. And they'll proceed to drain it for you and compress it so that it doesn't fill up with blood again.
Okay, so are they just draining out blood, basically?
Yep, that's exactly what they're doing.
And then they compress it. How does that work, and why is that so important?
Okay, so what happens is once you drain the fluid, you kind of need the layer of perichondrium to stick to the cartilage, because if you don't compress it and ensure that the perichondrium sticks to the cartilage, basically that it will fill up with blood again eventually because the blood vessels are torn. So what you actually want to do is once you've drained the fluid, you actually need to ensure that it's all wrapped up nicely in a compression bandage, and you'll probably keep that bandage on for like a couple of days, and that way you won't have the situation where you drain it and it refills and you drain it and it refills. I've had many teammates who had who had problems like this because they chose to drain it by themselves and they didn't know that they needed to compress it to prevent the swelling from reforming.
So you've got a lot of great pictures on your website. You've got really the diagram of the ear showing the cartilage and the is it perichondrium? I'm saying that right?
Yep, perichondrium.
And the hematoma, and then how to compress it and that sort of thing. So everybody should, if you're curious about this, definitely check that out. There's really great illustrations and just it's so much easier to learn what's going on with those pictures. So let's say I get my ear damaged, and I do it in the evening. I got to go home and go to sleep, and then go to work, and I just can't get in there right away. What kind of a time frame do I have before it starts becoming more of a permanent damage?
Okay, so in general, if ideally you try to get medical attention as soon as possible, but if that's not possible, you generally have a 2-day window, give and take a few hours or so before the hematoma starts to clot and organize and the healing starts to occur. So I think it would be best if you visit the doctor within 2 days. Okay, and then let's just say I messed up, I didn't really care, or I just didn't do it. Am I doing permanent damage to my ear if I wait longer than 2 days, or let's say a week, or I already have cauliflower ear from years ago? What's going on with my ear now? Okay, so once beyond 2 days, what happens is that the blood clot will start to form. So what will happen is that you end up forming like a clot in your ear. And so when you visit the doctor and they find out that, okay, it's been more than 2 days, they may actually need to have to cut or make a small little cut and take out the clot using like a pair of forceps. So if you wait a bit longer, it gets a little bit more complicated, and they may not be able to do it with just like a simple needle drainage. And once the cauliflower ear kind of sets in, it's a bit hard to treat it. You probably need to see either a specialist, either a ear, nose, and throat specialist, or even I think an ENT would be who you would like to see, because they may need to do some form of reconstruction. Okay. I'm not very sure about the details, but yeah. That sounds like a lot. It's like the old get it fixed, like stitch in time is worth 9. Like, get it fixed today, get it fixed before it gets worse. And it's way easier to fix it. Having a little needle poke in your ear is significantly better than having to have them cut it out of your ear, or have to go to some specialist that does reconstructive operation on your ear. It's definitely worth visiting the doctor a bit earlier to avoid all of that problem. Besides looking kind of unusual to most people, are there any other negative effects of cauliflower ear? Well, to be honest, it's actually not that big a deal, because it's kind of cosmetic, because it kind of looks funny. But other than that, it doesn't really cause a lot of problems. Possibly the only problem that could possibly occur is that if you have really bad cauliflower ear, it can eventually swell up to the point where it kind of blocks the ear canal and it kind of affects your hearing. So, but I think that would mean that it will be really, really bad, and it's probably unlikely to happen. So I think it's not that much of an issue.
Yeah, it seems like most of the swelling of the ear happens towards the, I would say, top half or above the ear canal.
Yes.
I have seen it in a training partner who had cauliflower ear, pretty bad, and he just let his ears go. He finally got it like in the lower part by the canal, and it started to swell up. And I got to go to the doctor. I can't have my ear canal getting closed by this. So he actually took that a little more seriously. Fortunately for him, at least. Mm. Are some people more susceptible to getting this, or is it, if you get hit in the ear, it's the same on anybody?
Well, again, I'm not too sure about this because I don't think any research has really been done about like this kind of injury. But I suppose we all know that guy who's like that white belt who just started training and it's been barely a month and he already has a cauliflower ear. So I think it does vary from person to person. I'm not sure exactly why, but definitely some people are more prone to it. And I think a big part about it is your style of jiu-jitsu. So some people have a really like a kind of grinding style where they love to grind their heads against people, maybe when they pass or when they play a lot of half guard, and that puts them in positions where the opponent can put a lot of pressure on their ears. So I think it also how you play your game in jiu-jitsu kind of affects whether or not you get cauliflower ear. So because I haven't had any problems with my ear because I tend to play a lot of open guard and I don't let myself get smushed by anybody.
Yeah, I completely agree. Probably some of it is just how your ear is made, and some people get it more likely, but a lot of it is your style of play. My ear got a little agitated with me when I was working on double leg takedowns. I kept hitting the side of my head up against their hip. And I said, well, I'm going to not do that so much anymore. I'm going to work on a different type of takedown. And then also, I'm not a big fan of letting, if I could control it, people just kind of crush on my head and get my ears folded up and smashed. So I try to avoid that as well. And I've been pretty fortunate to avoid it for myself. But
unfortunately, sometimes you can't really control it because the other way you can get cauliflower ear is if, for example, somebody accidentally knees you in the head, and sometimes how are you going to control that? So I guess the only way you can prevent that is you choosing your partners carefully. You don't want to partner anybody who's a bit too spazzy or a bit too explosive for you, and you can't guarantee your own safety. So you might want to avoid situations like that.
Good advice, Peter. So let's just say I got my ear drained. Can I go back on the mat tomorrow, or do I need to wait a little while, or do I need to keep it packed for a certain amount of time, or how's this work?
Well, in general, you probably shouldn't return back to training like immediately after. I think a good guideline is probably to wait for like around a week before you go back, because it's quite easy to re-injure your ear. I mean, you just had it drained, so what's the rush? Why would you want to? I know it's very tempting to get back, but I think it's generally wise to keep away from the mats for maybe like a good week. I think you can probably get away with some like light drilling, but you probably want to avoid like all forms of like full contact sparring.
Okay, and of course the headgear also helps as well. But about a week or so off, and just get back
so
when you can.
I think a week or so off, and then when you get back, you can probably wear some headgear to prevent any injury, like re-injury from occurring. And once it heals completely, you can probably take the headgear off if you don't like it, or you can keep it on, and that will help prevent any new injuries from occurring.
All right, Peter, we've covered a lot about cauliflower ear, but a lot of times people either do this at home, they drain it at home and pack it, or they do it at the gym. Somebody knows how to do it. What advice do you have for somebody? Why is it important to go see a doctor or professional versus just doing that yourself?
Well, so I think there are a couple of advantages to seeing a healthcare professional as opposed to doing it yourself. First and foremost, I think, first of all, it's very important to use clean needles. So I'm not sure, if you're going to do it by yourself, make sure that you're using like a clean needle and you're making sure that the wound is clean after you drain it. So if you do it at home, the risk of infection will be a bit higher because you may not do it in like aseptic technique. So if you see the doctor, they can probably ensure that there'll be like a lower chance of infection. And other than that, the doctor can actually give you, like, as I said, some form of local anesthesia, so the drainage will be less painful. Some people find that the pain is not that big a deal because it's just a small needle, so it may not really be a big factor. And other than that, I think sometimes you may not know the extent of the injury, so you kind of can guess that there's a hematoma, but you may not be able to realize if a clot has been formed and if needle drainage is insufficient. So going to a doctor can help because they can determine if they need to cut it open to remove any clots, or they can even, if they discover that you actually need to see a specialist, they can refer you to the right people. So I think in general, I would definitely recommend that you see a doctor or a healthcare professional. That being said, I know that healthcare can be expensive, and sometimes it's just really, really inconvenient to see the doctor, especially if this happens a lot to you when you train. So I guess in situations like that, if you really cannot avoid it, I guess you could probably drain it by yourself, but just make sure that you use clean needles and you find some way to compress it afterwards, because if you drain it and you don't compress it, it's as good as not draining it. So there are many ways to compress it. I hear that some people have had success with using neodymium magnets to compress it. So just make sure that you compress it, whatever method you use. Just ensure that you keep the two layers stuck together so that the hematoma doesn't form again.
And that's one great thing about having a professional. They'll tell you, okay, based on your injury, you need to have it compressed for this amount of time. And when you're doing it at home, you might compress it not long enough, or you might compress it for way too long. You just don't have that sort of guidance.
Yep.
Okay. Anything else you want to add about cauliflower ear and taking care of your ears?
No, not really. I think we've gone into it in pretty good detail.
Okay.
Yep.
And you mentioned the cost of going to a doctor. This doesn't sound like a real expensive doctor visit, even if you don't have insurance. You'll get your ear drained and packed. It shouldn't be too terribly expensive. And I would urge people, to take care of it now versus later. It'll be a lot cheaper, a lot quicker, a lot less pain. Just take care of yourself. It's part of it's an important part of you, and if you don't want to have cauliflower ears, you need to get on that as soon as you can.
Yep, exactly.
Okay, Daniel, let's move on. Talking about a topic that I've always been curious about. Having been choked unconscious a couple of times on the mats, what's happening to my brain? Am I doing any damage? It's always happened to me on accident. I was intending to tap, but I just woke up later on. Maybe just walk me through a little bit about the choke and what's happening before we get too much into the brain damage that might or might not occur.
Yep.
I don't know.
Okay, so before we talk about what happens when you get choked out, I think first we need to differentiate between like a blood choke and a windpipe choke.
Okay.
So I'm sure we've all felt the difference between like a forearm choke against the windpipe as opposed to like a rear naked choke. So a blood choke, what it does is that it cuts off the arterial supply to the head. So it will cut off the carotid arteries in the neck. And what this will do is that it reduces the blood flow and eventually stops the blood flow to the front part of the brain. And that will cause you to lose consciousness within around 10 seconds, around there. So that's how you end up losing consciousness when you get choked out.
And the other kind of choke, the pressure on your neck is just a very painful thing that could, I guess, could be very serious injury if you're able to not.
Yeah. So like for a windpipe choke, it's it's really painful, but actually the risk of injury is not that high because it's very painful, and your trachea, which is the name for the windpipe, is actually reinforced by cartilage, so it's actually quite strong. So unless you get crushed by a punch to your windpipe, it's unlikely to be damaged. And if you actually get choked out, you'll probably feel the pain before you actually damage your windpipe. So as long as you tap early, you probably can avoid any windpipe injuries. Yeah. Because the pain will get you before any damage has been done, because it's quite sensitive.
I've never actually seen or I guess heard of anybody getting their windpipe seriously damaged from a choke like that.
It's pretty rare, I think.
It's just so much. Listen to your body; it's screaming in pain, and that's a good time to tap. But I mean, in reality, it's the differences between the blood and the windpipe would be your brain is needing that blood right now, and the blood already has oxygen in it. But the windpipe, I mean, in theory, you could still be awake for a little while because your blood's still pumping and getting to your brain. It's more like a breath holding type of thing. That would be a little slower.
That being said, sometimes if, for example, if you a windpipe choke can eventually end up becoming a blood choke, because if you compress the front of the neck enough, you might actually end up compressing the carotid arteries as well. So sometimes like a really tight guillotine can start off as a wind choke, and it can eventually proceed into becoming a blood choke, and you still can go out.
Okay, yeah, I would I definitely think I've felt that before, and a lot of chokes are kind of in between, to where you're getting that pressure on your windpipe, and you're also getting a little dizzy at the same time.
Yep.
So, kind of walk me through. Actually, let me tell you about my experiences. One time, the most recent time I got choked unconscious, we were demonstrating a technique, and I thought that the technique was. It didn't feel like it was that tight, and he says my instructor said, "Can you get out of this?" And I thought, well, I could at least try. And as I'm trying to get out of it, my arms kind of got numb and really couldn't move very well. And the next thing I know, he's asking me if I went unconscious. And that was about it. But so what really happened to me in that situation? And I did go unconscious. I was completely out, just laying there on the mat, asleep in front of an entire class that was watching this technique get demonstrated. But so what happened to my brain? What happened to my body? Why did I feel numbness in my arms? That sort of thing. If you have any answers for that.
Well, so as for like the numbness in the arms, I'm not too sure exactly, but in general, what is happening physiologically is that your brain is very sensitive to changes in blood supply and its oxygen supply. So the brain is like the most important part of your body. So whenever anything goes wrong, the first thing your body does is to try to preserve the blood flow to the brain. So that kind of shows you just how important ensuring that enough blood goes to your brain is to your body. So what happens when you get choked out is that you are cutting off the blood supply, and if what happens is this, you enter a state called cerebral hypoxia. So that means that there's not enough oxygen going to your brain, and because your brain is so sensitive, within 10 seconds of cutting off the blood supply, you will lose consciousness. As for the details, it's a bit hard for me to explain, and I'm not too sure myself. But in general, it's because there's insufficient oxygen to your brain, and you end up losing consciousness.
Okay, yeah, and that's the way I understand it as well. And maybe the numbness in my arms, and I felt numbness in my arms from several chokes that I was fortunate enough to fight off. But I think as I'm feeling this, I'm going to go out, or I should be tapping. And sometimes I end up tapping with my hand I can hardly feel, or I'm able to kind of just wiggle out and get free of the choke. But that to me is my last symptom before I'm going to get put unconscious. And some people say their vision starts to go and they start to lose that. And basically, I think what you're describing is the body will shut off things and just try to get the brain oxygen, and maybe that's the cause of that. I don't know.
Yeah. I think it really varies from person to person. So, for example, for me, I kind of feel like the whole room is closing in on me, and I feel like I slowly like lose my peripheral vision, and like I feel like I feel like the whole room is collapsing on me. I don't really feel the numbness, so I think the exact symptoms really vary. And again, I'm not sure if any like studies have been done. So if there have been studies, I'm not very aware of them. So I'm not sure about the details about the numbness.
Yeah, neither am I, Peter. I think I feel that too. I feel like somebody gets a real tight rear naked choke or something that's happening very fast. It's like the door's getting slammed closed, and there's no numbness in my arms. And I think the numbness that I experience is when the choke is not quite perfect. It's not quite where I want to tap, and I'm struggling, but I'm still not getting enough oxygen to my brain to make it happy, and it's struggling there. That's the only time I've been choked unconscious was when I thought I could get out, when I didn't think the choke was that good. I got choked from top on side control, and there was just almost no way I was going to tap to this because I'm on side control, I'm on top, but his hands were in a good spot. And I just, like, everything my brain was telling me is, you can get out of this. It's not a big deal. And, and then it just shut off. But so I recommend not to get choked unconscious at all if you could avoid it. Just to tap from the choke and to move on. Is there? Do you think there's damage being done when it's left without oxygen briefly, or is it not that big a deal?
Okay, so in general, your brain can. What happens is that if you cut off the blood supply to the brain for like greater than 4 minutes, that is when you start to get irreversible damage to your brain. So, for example, when you hear about people getting strokes or like bleeding in the brain, the damage starts to occur like after 4 minutes. So, if you think about it, it's very unlikely in jiu-jitsu that you'll be holding on to a choke for like greater than like maybe 20 seconds, because I'm sure you realize that the guy has gone limp. So I would think that it's not very common for you to have, it probably is very, very unlikely that you will have any lasting brain damage. However, in certain individuals, for example, if you had a previous stroke or any previous like serious brain injuries, your brain's tolerance to like a lack of oxygen might be a lot lower. So in that case, the risk might be a bit higher. I'm unable to really quantify the risk. But in general, for the vast majority of us out there, I don't think getting choked out will lead to any lasting brain damage.
It feels like on some chokes that my head is going to just like explode. Is blood getting in but not going out, maybe, or what's happening there?
So actually, if you look at like the anatomy of the neck, it's kind of hard for me to explain it like just through like my voice alone.
Yeah.
But what happens is that there's also a jugular vein like next to the carotid artery. So just so that for those of you out there who don't really know, so what happens is the artery will bring blood to an organ, and the vein will kind of bring the blood away from the organ back to the heart. So when you feel a choke being locked in, what happens is that the vein is a bit more superficial. So what happens is that the vein gets blocked first, and you get this feeling of like this engorgement of blood in your head, and that's because you're kind of obstructing the flow of blood from the brain back to the heart. So you will feel like this sensation where your head is about to explode because the blood's not returning. And if once the choke gets a bit deeper, then you start to feel like that. Then you start to compress on the carotid artery, and then you really go out. But before that, the veins are occluded first. Okay. And that's why you feel like your head's about to explode.
Yeah. Okay. I didn't know if it was. I'm looking at a picture now. The vein is more on the outside, so a lighter press to the neck would cause the pressure, and sure, blood's getting to your brain, but that same blood isn't able to exit your head, and you're just getting pressure built up. So in that situation, would that be more potentially dangerous for somebody who is a stroke risk, or maybe some of our more senior grapplers who are a little up there in age? Is that a more dangerous thing to have that sort of pressure on your head, or is that dangerous for everybody, or not that big a deal?
I don't think it's that big a deal because it's the pressure it's not over like an extended period of time, so it's unlikely to cause any damage. So that being said, it's probably not a good idea to get choked out very often if you have other medical conditions. But in general, I think that if you fall into that category where you've had a previous stroke or any like traumatic brain injury, you're probably not doing jiu-jitsu in your free time. You're probably a bit more sick. So I think for the vast majority of practitioners out there, even those who are a bit older, I wouldn't worry too much about this unless your doctor has specifically warned you about something. So, for example, there is a rare situation where like getting choked out can cause a bit of problems, but this only occurs to a small population of people. It's really rare. So for certain people, there's such a thing called carotid sinus hypersensitivity. So again, if you look at the anatomy, there's this thing in the artery, the carotid artery, called the carotid sinus or the carotid body, and its purpose is to regulate blood pressure. So what happens is if you get choked out and you compress the arteries, the carotid sinus will sense an increase in pressure, and it will feed back to the heart to slow down the rate of pumping. So if you have a very hypersensitive, this reflex is hypersensitive, you can end up having like your heart can stop momentarily, or there can be other heart problems. But this is really rare. It doesn't happen to everyone, and usually it will present to you before you get choked out. Like, for example, you may faint on a regular basis, or you find that you fall down all of a sudden and you don't know why. So that could happen, but it's really, really very rare.
Oh, okay. I've never heard of that,
yeah.
And I'm not even going to try to pronounce it.
I think I'll just say it one more time. It's called carotid sinus hypersensitivity. It's very rare, so I wouldn't worry too much about it.
Okay,
yeah.
Good. If I get choked out on accident, or I'm just too stubborn to tap from the choke or whatever, I end up getting woken up by people. How is there... A lot of times I see people lift up the legs to get the blood flow rushed back to the head, or is that really necessary? The heart's still pumping away. So do you have any idea of maybe a good method to wake somebody up?
Well, I think actually you probably don't really need to do much, because eventually the blood flow will find its way back into the head. So I'm not too sure about like what's the right way to do it. So for example, like for medics and for like medical personnel, usually when people lose consciousness, they kind of recommend that you put them in like a recovery position, which is like kind of tilted to the side. So I tend to favor that. But I know that a lot of people, like, they lift the legs up, and I think theoretically that's quite sound because you're trying to return the blood back to the head. So I don't think it really matters that much, because your body will, the blood will eventually get back to the brain. So I think it matters a bit. It doesn't really matter that much.
Yeah.
So I tend to favor the recovery position, but I know a lot of people will lift the legs up. I'm not too sure about what the right way to do it is.
Yeah, just do the recovery position, get them on their side. I don't think that people are likely to vomit from a head injury, but if somebody does, or from being choked, but if somebody does, you don't want them to be laying on their back while that happens, while they're unconscious. That could be very dangerous.
Yeah.
So get them on their side, and their heart always pumps the blood to their brain anyway. That's going to do a fine job of getting the blood back into the brain.
Yep.
So I get choked out. Okay, I feel when it's happened to me, I literally for a minute or so, I feel pretty sleepy and tired and confused. And after that, I feel okay, a little bit disappointed in myself that something like that happened to me, because of it is really my own fault when I get choked out.
Yep.
I'm always given time to tap, but I'm just too stubborn, or I didn't see it coming. Let's say I get choked out, and for the few minutes that after it happens, I feel kind of sleepy and confused. But after that, I I feel okay. Do you think it's okay to return on the mat, or should I be packing it up and getting ready to go home, or just my teammates be watching me, or how do I know if I'm okay to continue to work out that evening?
Okay, so that's a good question. I think there's no real hard and fast rule. It all depends on the situation and the person involved. So I think a good rule of the thumb is that you should listen to your body. So I've had many teammates who've been choked out, and they actually feel fine maybe 10 minutes later. So they're still able to continue training. But I think it's wise to always pay attention to how you're feeling. So if you feel like you're very tired for an extended period of time, it's probably wise to take it a bit easier and even stop training altogether for that session. So I would really recommend that you pay attention to how you're feeling, and don't try to you try not to tough it out and do anything unwise.
Okay, yeah, and it just seems like to me, try not to get choked unconscious again that same day. Maybe it's not a big deal, but it just seems like it would be, you don't want to get hit in the head, you get a concussion, and then get a concussion before you're done healing. It just seems
I think that's definitely wise, to avoid getting choked out again.
Just take that extra caution. Maybe it's not really doing anything for you, but be a little more careful in your chokes next time, especially, in the immediate future. I'm glad to hear that and I know that there's limited research on this. It's kind of a new phenomenon that we have people choking each other, and sometimes they go unconscious, and most of them don't get medical help to see the research on what's happening to their brain and any damage. But with a lot of the sometimes the striking arts, you're taking these shots to the head, you're getting dizzy on a daily basis, or you're occasionally getting knocked down or even knocked out. That is could be very damaging to your brain. But on the rare occasion that we get choked good enough to make us go unconscious, it appears to be, as long as you're in a safe environment, people who realize that you're out, not super dangerous for you.
Yep. I agree.
Okay. Any other things that you would recommend involving getting choked unconscious, as far as things to look out for, or anything like that, or have we kind of covered it pretty well?
Well, I think in general, tapping early is the smartest thing in this situation. I mean, it's probably best to not be choked out in the first place, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. I agree. And if you're just a stubborn person, I've only, having been choked out a couple times myself, I've been fortunate that I haven't lost control of my bodily functions, but I've heard rumors of this. So, just if you're that stubborn, keep in mind, you might end up having to change your gi pants because of this, and that would be rather embarrassing. So to tap earlier, it's not that big a deal. We're here to train and have a good time. So,
yep.
Let's talk a little bit, and this is a huge topic. This could be an episode in itself, about skin infections. Just kind of, if you want to open up a little bit about skin infections that we can get while training, or things to look out for.
Okay, so skin infections is like it's a big topic in jiu-jitsu and other combat sports, mainly because of the great amount of skin on skin contact in grappling and other forms of combat sports like kickboxing or any clinch fighting. And because gyms are usually moist environments that are very warm, it usually is very conducive for microorganisms to grow on your skin. So in general, infections can be classified according to the organism that is doing the infecting. So in general, there would usually be bacterial infections, viral infections, and fungal infections. There are other infections out there by parasites like worms, but I think that's not very, very common in maybe big cities and other developed countries. They may be more of an issue in other tropical countries, or if your training environment isn't very clean. But in general, the big three would be bacterial, viral, and fungal infections. Okay,
those are the big three. And you have 3 great articles on those, in covering them in a lot more detail than we're probably going to be able to do today. Could you just maybe give an idea of some general symptoms that somebody might have a skin infection?
Yeah, okay. So Again, it depends on the organism. So bacterial infections, basically infections can be like classified. Besides the organism, they can be classified into like which layer of the skin is involved. So if the deeper layers are involved, they would be more serious, and if the outer layers are involved, it's less serious. So for bacterial infections, generally bacterial infections tend to be painful, and you might even have symptoms such as fever, and you might see that there's like a swelling that with a lot of pus. So that's characteristic of a bacterial infection. You see pus, fever, redness, and you just feel a bit unwell. As for viral infections are a bit tricky because they tend to be asymptomatic. So you don't really feel anything. It may not really be itchy. You just see little warty things or little fluid-filled bubbles on your skin. So viral infections tend to be a bit tricky because you may not even know that they're there. As for fungal infections tend to be manifest in terms of like itching, and you kind of see that your skin is starting to flake, and like basically your skin is like falling apart. So I think in broad strokes, that's how I would say that they differ in terms of their general symptoms.
Yeah, and you've got a lot of pictures online. If you have a concern about what you have, it's always hard to try to diagnose yourself online. When should somebody go see a doctor and get some help with this sort of thing?
Yep. So again, there's a whole field, like a specialty in medicine dedicated to the skin. So that kind of goes to show that it's actually a very visual field. So a lot of things look like other things, and it's very confusing to like the untrained eye. So even I don't, as a medical student, it's really hard for me to tell the difference between like, for example, eczema and a fungal infection. So in general, I would recommend that most people should go and see a doctor, and they should see the doctor when they find that there's an unusual thing on their skin. So if it wasn't there before, and you suddenly see, like for example, like a wart or something, you should probably go see the doctor. And you should also see the doctor if you feel like you may be having a bacterial infection. So you like see an abscess that's painful, like a staph infection. So in general, just pay attention to your skin when you're like taking a shower or you're grooming yourself. And if you see anything unusual, it's probably wise to maybe observe it for a couple of days. And if it isn't going away, you should probably go see the doctor.
Yeah, and then the doctor's also going to be able to give you that advice whether this is contagious for your people on the mat with you, and that's good information to know. I mean, it's one thing to tough out an ankle injury and train, but if you're getting on the mat and giving everybody skin infections, you need to not be doing that. It doesn't. Not a lot of gray area there. It's either you're contagious or you're not, and if you are contagious, you shouldn't be on the mat. What would you say? And I know we don't have a lot of like numbers on jiu-jitsu and skin infections as far as numbers wise, but what is one of the more common or some of the more common skin infections in jiu-jitsu?
So I would say that the deeper skin infections are a bit more uncommon. So for example, you probably wouldn't need to worry about anything deeper than the outer layers of the skin. So for bacterial infections, the most common would be this thing called impetigo. So you would see like a golden kind of crust on your skin. Other infections that are common would be like general like abscesses and boils by the common organism would be like staph. So staph is the most that's how people describe it as staph, but staph is actually just the organism. The thing itself is called a boil or an abscess. As for fungal infections, ringworm is the most common. So you probably see like this ring-like itchy thing on your skin. And viral infections, it's really a mixed bag. It depends on it. For example, I think warts are very common, like viral warts. So I think it depends on where you are living. So for example, in a tropical country in Singapore where it's really warm, I think fungal infections are a bigger deal because like fungi thrive in hot, moist environments. And for example, sometimes in my gym, especially during like no gi, it gets so sweaty that the mats are like you're drenched in sweat, and there are little puddles of sweat on the mats. That would be like the prime breeding ground for like a fungal infection, but it would be different in a colder country. So I think it really depends from like where you're at and how clean your gym is. Yeah.
Okay, and I've had ringworm more times than I know. It's been years since I've had it, but back in my earlier days of training, I'd get it every 3 or 4 months. I get ringworm, and because of that, I think that at least on my own body, I could say, okay, this is ringworm, and I know how to proceed to get rid of it from there. But first time, sometimes you get a student that's like, "What is this something?" And a lot of times, I feel confident in saying that looks like a ringworm. Get some treatment at the store, and but that doesn't start working, maybe it's something else. So even then, like I said, skin infections are hard to identify. But having some experience with it, and a lot of coaches are able to identify ringworm pretty easily. But I think that's one of the easier ones, and that's a fungal infection, is what you're saying, right?
Yeah.
And I think sometimes some people have that. Is that possible to have that living in your gi, to where if you don't get your gi cleaned really well and dry, it is actually every time you put your gi back on, you're actually reintroducing that to your system and everybody else's system. Is that a possibility?
Yeah, I think that's definitely a possibility. So we all know that guy who doesn't wash his gi, and his gi is always really wet and disgusting. So in situations like that, I think it's definitely possible for microorganisms to stay on the gi. So I would definitely recommend that everyone wash their gear regularly, because you don't want to be passing your germs and all these nasty microorganisms to your partners.
Yeah, and sometimes it seems like the person has washed their gi, they say they did, and it still just has a bit of an odor to it. They're either not getting it clean enough, or maybe it's beyond repair at this point in time. But a lot of people don't do a good job of drying their gi, because they don't want to put it in the dryer. It tumbles it all for an hour and makes it worn out, and it'll shrink it sometimes if it hasn't been shrunk already. For myself, I will hang it up, and then I'll take a fan and point the fan at the gi as it's hanging, and that moving air will really help get it to dry out quickly and not take 12 or more hours to dry. So I don't have any, I guess I don't have any scientific evidence behind it, but I have to get my gi cleaned as soon as I get home and get it drying as soon as possible. And I think that helps me keep ringworm free.
Yeah, I think that's not a big deal in Singapore because it's really warm here.
Okay.
So the sun is always out there. So I find that my gis dry within a couple of hours, as long as I leave them out to dry. So
you put them in the sun?
Using the fan is definitely a good idea. Yeah.
Do you put them outside in the sun, or is just warm enough inside?
I try to avoid direct sunlight, but sometimes it's just really hot. It's just so warm that your gis just dry on their own out there within a couple of hours.
Okay. And so I think we're kind of covering ringworm, one of the more common things. What would be one of the more serious or potentially dangerous skin infections that people can get?
Okay, so in general, the fungal infections and the viral infections are probably not as serious as compared to the bacterial infections. So for bacterial infections, the deeper infections would be a bit more worrying. So for example, cellulitis and anything deeper than that would be a cause for concern, because what you're worried about when you have a bacterial infection is that the infection kind of spreads either through the blood to other parts of the body, and you can enter into a very serious illness called sepsis. And either that or the bacteria could spread into the surrounding region, so you could get a bone infection. So in general, bacterial infections are a bit more worrying, but in jiu-jitsu, it's unlikely that you will end up having a situation like this because it's very obvious when you have a serious infection. It's not something that it's easy to train through because you will be very unwell. So you will have a fever, you have a swinging fever. So sometimes your fever will be really high and then it comes down again, and you'll have chills. So you probably will know that it's a serious infection, and you probably go to the doctor on your own. So most of the other infections aren't that life-threatening. Yeah.
Okay. With the staph, is that typically caused by an abrasion to the skin or something like that, and then it's able to get in there, or is that I don't really understand how people get staph. Does it just happen, or?
Yeah. So if you think about your human body, so your skin acts as a barrier protecting the inside from the outside. So as long as there's a break in that barrier, be it in the form of an abrasion or a cut, it kind of acts as like a portal of entry for all the like nasty organisms out there. So what happens is if there's a cut, it's easy for the bacteria to go inside, and it will like colonize the area and cause there to be some infection. So that's generally what happens.
Okay. And then what will this cut look like if it's going to be bad and I'm going to end up getting sick and a fever and not feeling good? Does this cut get all red and irritated, or does it swell up, or what generally happens when somebody gets a staph infection like that?
Yep. So it's bacterial infections are very characteristic. So you will generally see some form of redness, swelling, and pain. So that will like immediately indicate to you that there's some form of like bacterial infection, and there might or might not be a fever depending on how serious it is. So redness, swelling, and pain.
Okay, and then
and warmth as well. You feel like the area is a bit warmer than the surrounding area. Yeah.
Yeah, it feels like it's cooking in there.
Yep.
I got it's been maybe about a year ago. I got bit by a cat, which wasn't on the mat, thank goodness. But the cat bit me, and I guess cats. My doctor said a cat bite is worse than a dog bite because the cats have so much bacteria in their mouth compared to a dog. And
I would imagine.
The doctor took a pin and drew a circle around the redness, and then he I guess you watch that to see if it gets bigger or what's going on. Why is that done?
He probably was just worried that the infection would spread, and he probably didn't want to give you did he give you antibiotics straight away?
Yeah. I don't know if it was, I don't remember. It was long enough ago that I don't remember, but I think he was kind of just watching to see if it was going to get bigger or get smaller.
Yeah. So in general, if you see that like a bacterial infection, like an abscess is getting bigger, so that should warn you that look, your body is not able to fight this off. So I guess the reason why he did that is just so that he could be alerted to like an infection that wasn't resolving.
Okay, so my body is not doing a good job of fighting that, and I'm going to need some antibiotics to help get rid of that.
Yeah. Though I suspect that if it was a cat bite, he probably would have immediately given you antibiotics.
I think you're right. I think he did, but it's just interesting to see. That's kind of my body isn't going to be able to fight that off on its own. At least not without making me very sick in the process. So, redness, swelling, and the heat is often there, I guess, with this type of an infection. And if you feel sick and you go to the doctor and you have a cut that looks kind of angry, you tell that to your doctor. Like we said earlier, tell them why you think you're here. And if you have a cut on your leg and they don't see it and they're just treating you to be, you're sick for some reason, we got to figure this out. Well, you might have a staph infection on your leg that's making you sick. Is that good advice to tell them about that?
Yeah, that's great advice.
Okay. Well, there's a lot more to go on skin infections. You've got 3 articles, one each on the fungal, viral, and bacterial, kind of breaking those down with pictures and things like that. Do you have anything, just broad sense, to say about skin infections and doing jiu-jitsu?
Well, I think that actually, it's exactly like any other like condition. Prevention is better than cure. So in general, you want to prevent any skin infection from occurring. So I think the best way to do that is to maintain a good standard of hygiene. So I would really recommend that people shower immediately after training. They ensure that they use soap to scrub all the areas of your body. And I will also recommend that you avoid training when you have an open wound. So you should definitely cover up any cuts or any abrasions so that it's less likely that you get any infection. So I think in general, if you take care of your hygiene, it's unlikely that you will get a skin infection. And also, as long as the gym is clean and the mats are cleaned regularly, it's also it makes it a bit less likely that an infection will occur.
You need to take care of yourself, making sure you're clean. Also helps greatly if the mats are clean and if your training partners are taking care of themselves, which might involve a kind of an odd conversation about, hey, your gi is not as clean as we'd like, or it's you kind of smell like you've been working outside all day and you're already walking in and you're filthy. Maybe a shower before you work out isn't a bad idea either. But it's really for the safety for everybody on the mat, because we're going to get abrasions on our skin while we train. If we can make it a cleaner environment to begin with, it will be less likely to get a serious infection from that. All right, Daniel, we've talked about cauliflower ear, brain injury, and skin infections. And while I have you here, I definitely want to kind of just dive into a little bit. And this could be, like I said, about the skin thing, a whole episode on its own. Getting injured on the mat, maybe a more traumatic injury. And just, I mean, we could go anywhere. I mean, this could be arm, leg, ribs, back, anything. But I think the easiest way to start with, have you witnessed or been a part of or been on the mat when somebody was injured? And maybe if you have a story for that, you could share and might just kind of help us understand the process of helping a teammate that gets hurt.
Okay, so I actually have encountered a situation such as that. So I was training one day, doing some no-gi, and I think one of my teammates, she re-injured her knee, so her patella, which is the kneecap, had a dislocation, and she fell on the floor clutching her knee, and she was like screaming in pain. So I think in general, whenever something like that happens, the first thing you need to do is assess how severe it is. So, for example, if you sprain an ankle, it's unlikely that you need immediate medical treatment because you probably can take care of yourself, and the injury is not as severe. So, in her case, she was in a lot of pain, and I could tell that she wouldn't be able to move on her own. So it was very hard for us to even move her because she was in a lot of pain. So in a situation like that, what I did was I called the ambulance immediately because I realized that she needed to go get help like right now. And since we weren't able to move her, it would be best if the medics got here and put her on a stretcher. So I think in general, what we should do when something like that happens is first see how severe it is and then determine whether or not you actually need help. And if you don't need help, then follow the basic guidelines to sports injury, which would be to use the RICE protocol, which is rest, ice, compression, and elevation, and that will usually do the trick.
So those are the RICE would be good. You get a little banged up and end up having you go home still, and just kind of remember those things to take care of yourself over the immediate future at home. The other deal, you end up calling for help, and having been on the other side of that as a firefighter, occasionally we get called out to somebody who has an injured knee or a broken leg or something, and it is really too painful to move them. And we have splints, we have devices to put on the leg, and a lot of times why it hurts so bad, especially with the broken bones, is because the bones are rubbing against each other and they're moving around in there.
Yeah, exactly.
And your leg isn't being supported by the skeletal system, and so the splint will actually take care of that. The splint's going to support your leg and prevent those bones from rubbing on each other, and so you'll have somebody who's in agonizing pain on the ground, and they just don't want to. They barely can tell you their name. And we say, you put the splint on them, and it still hurts, but they're able to help and to deal with the situation. It takes away a lot of the pain. So just as a teammate, if someone's in that much pain, it's like going to the doctor because they numb your ear before they take the blood out. They'll be able to take away some of the pain and discomfort before they move you, and so it won't be nearly as a miserable experience. So that's great advice. I think you did the perfect thing. Especially, she had a pre-existing knee injury, and she knew this is likely what happened to me. My knees are already bad. So, do you have any idea of maybe when to make that judgment of I'm going to call for an ambulance, or I'm just going to go home? Any idea of when that should be done? Is it listening to your body type of thing?
I guess again, I don't think there's any hard and fast rule. It depends on the situation. So, I think if maybe after like 5 minutes you see that the person isn't getting any better and the pain is just too much for them to handle and they can't take care of themselves, I think in a situation like that, it will be wise to call for help. But if you see that, okay, the pain has somewhat subsided, because I know every injury starts off with a lot of pain. But for example, if you tear your ACL, there'll be you hear a pop sound and there'll be a lot of swelling. But in general, you probably don't really need to call the ambulance because the swelling might go down. You can support your friend, and when the swelling goes down, he can see the doctor himself. But so I would say that maybe perhaps wait like 5 minutes, and if it isn't getting any better and you don't think you're able to move the person by yourself, then maybe you should contemplate calling for help. Yeah.
That's good advice, and of course, err on the side of caution. Anything with a neck or your back injury, it can be very serious. So just err on the side of caution. Sometimes, if you think that you probably should be calling, you probably should call. Don't because then you also have the project of driving yourself home. Typically, most of us aren't fortunate enough to show up in groups of people. Or if you got to ride on a train to get home, or a bus, or whatever, you still have to get home somehow, and that could be a miserable experience.
Yeah, so, it can be really hard.
That's good advice. Just to try to gauge how serious it is, and yeah, it's good to hear that, and it's unfortunate when it happens, but it's also helpful when we kind of have it in the back of our mind. If this does happen to somebody or to me, this is how we're going to proceed, and it makes it a little less stressful. All right, Daniel, that doesn't at all wrap up the topic of medical issues and training, but it just really scratches the surface of the skin there. But I do have another question for you. You are a medical student and you're training jiu-jitsu. Can you just kind of give me a little insight of how you're able to do both of those at the same time, and maybe juggle your schedule and get the most out of your training while you're also a very busy person?
So to get a sense of it, I don't want people out there to think that I'm some hardcore competitor who trains like 8 times a week. So to put things in perspective, I consider it a good week if I can squeeze in like maybe like 3 training sessions.
Okay, yeah.
So in general, I just prioritize my time, and I'm the kind of person, I'm a bit hyperactive, and I think if I had been diagnosed earlier, I have some form of like attention deficit disorder. So I find that I actually can study better, and I can do focus a lot more when I do exercise. So actually, jiu-jitsu helps me like pay attention more. So I basically just have a very strict time management like scheme that helps me. Like I prioritize. I kind of have a fixed training time. So I always try to train on the weekends and maybe one time more during the week. And I try to stick to that as much as possible. So at least I have a routine, and I kind of work my way around that.
If you're having a big day of studying, a lot of reading, and a lot of just a lot of brain concentration, does it help you to get out and exercise a little bit and then come back to it later on? Think that helps you absorb material?
Yep. It definitely helps me. So I've had, because I have to do I have a lot of exams, and I realized that whenever I'm facing a dilemma about whether or not I should train in that situation, I realized that I should always just train, because like I can always find like maybe 1 hour in the day to train and exercise. And if I don't train, I find that I end up procrastinating and end up wasting 1 hour in the day anyway. So I always just try to train as much as possible, even if I have an exam coming up or like a big project coming up.
All right. I agree, and it's good to kind of break up your day, and I think exercise is a big key to brain health and helping you learn and absorb things, especially for students.
Yep.
So where can somebody go to find your website and maybe get a hold of you if they want to, or ask you a question or something like that?
You can visit my blog at Jiu-Jitsu Medic at WordPress. At the moment, I don't have any like Facebook page or any social media. I probably should start one soon. I think I'll probably create a greater social media presence when I actually have a bit more content. Because
okay.
Like right now, I feel like there isn't enough to really put myself out there. So, but I think that will change. I'm really trying to stick to the commitment of writing like maybe like one post every month or so. So I'll keep. I usually post on Reddit every time I make a new post. So I think if you observe the Reddit page, you'll kind of tell when I have a new post. But I'll definitely think of creating like a Facebook page soon.
Okay, and definitely just swing by and check out his website occasionally, and that would help you keep in contact with what he's doing. He's not writing here's 3 tips to train if you're a medical student. I mean, that might be an interesting article, but these articles that you're writing are very detailed. There's a lot of information out there. They're very well written. So that's why I got to reach out and contact this guy and get him on the show and talk about this. So I'm super happy that you were willing to do this today. And to share some of your medical expertise, and of course we have to always say when you give talking about medical stuff, consult a doctor. We're not actually giving you specific advice for your situation. We can't see you and that sort of thing. But just a lot of great information on your website. So I urge everybody to go check it out.
Thanks for the plug.
Yep, absolutely, and that's. I mean, I'm a fan of the website, and I'll be visiting it regularly to keep up with you. And if I don't see it on Reddit, I'll just have to stop by the website occasionally and see it there. So, and when you get a social media presence, I'll be following that as well. So, looking forward to that, Daniel. Any closing thoughts before I let you go, my friend?
Nothing really. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you very much for your time, and we'll keep in touch.
Okay.
I'd like to thank Peter Daniel for coming on the show and, just giving us great information. I mean, like I said earlier, cauliflower ears, skin infections, those are stuff we're going to run into all the time. But it's like half the time when we learn something or when we listen, we're going to forget unless we use our Evernote and put it all down. But the cool thing is we put a link to his website, jiu-jitsumedic.wordpress.com, and basically he goes back through cauliflower ear, how to treat it, why it happens, and he's got skin infections in there. And the great thing is he actually used Byron in this one too. So Byron volunteered. So basically, when we get to if you look at some of the pictures, Byron did volunteer for the jock picture. So,
Gary, thank you, buddy.
Yeah. So thanks, Byron. But it's just great the information, the information we have here, and thanks to Byron, like you said, after using some of that information, his jock itch is much better.
God, thank goodness that picture has a black bar over the part that you wouldn't want to see anyway.
Yeah. Well, some people want to see it. I mean, some people pay good money for websites like that.
Oh, Gary. Okay. This is not that type of website or podcast. Thank goodness. There's lots of, skin infections, cauliflower ear, getting choked unconscious. These are things that we will see or, they come up from time to time. And it's important to kind of have a baseline understanding of what you're dealing with, So if I don't really have cauliflower ear, I have a little bit of swelling in one of my ears. It's very light and you can't really notice it unless you squeeze it. Some people get cauliflower ear like the first 2 months of training.
Yeah.
And so as a coach or as somebody who's been on the mat with a little more experience, I can say, hey, man, you probably want to get that drained and packed and give them some advice. I'm not going to do it myself, but, that is nothing to be ignored for a long period of time. You need to have it taken care of if you don't want to have big ears the rest of your life. Yeah. So same thing with skin infection. Hey, man, that looks like it might be ringworm. Try this. If it doesn't start working pretty quick, you need to go to a doctor. Or, just kind of giving that general little bit of a knowledge about what you're looking at. And you can get a lot of that from his website already. So
yeah, yep. And one thing that I thought was really helpful is about cauliflower ear, the hematoma in your ear. And I've actually had mine done by doctors before, and one doctor told me you just have to get it drained, or he ended up cutting it open, but he told me I had 8 days, and basically here it tells you 48 hours. So, and it's funny because the guy told me 8 days, and he ended up using a scalpel and cutting my ear open, and my ear looks no different from what it did before. So I probably really only had 2 days, not 48 hours, or probably only had 2 days, not 8 days, like the other doctor was telling me. So what I really like about our guest there this week is he trains too. There's a big difference. Somebody who trains and is on the mat, you're going to understand it a little bit more than somebody who doesn't. And I'm not saying that a doctor who doesn't train doesn't know what he's talking about, because they definitely do. But you have, you just have a little bit more familiarity, however you say that word, when you have been on the mat and you've experienced these yourself or your teammates have. So, that's why it's so great that, Peter Daniel did come on the show, and, he trains. He's not only a medical student, but he does train. And, I love his website here, and I'm going to keep this to my favorites, in case something happens in the future.
Yep, it's just so well written, and you can tell he does his research and everything. So, keep it in mind if you, as a reference or just as general knowledge thing that you want to go look at. I recommend check out the link in the show notes.
Like you said, it's so well written. You know who he is, and then on top of that, he actually even lets Byron pose for one of the pictures. So I got to support it.
You know what? It is time, Gary. I'm putting my foot down on this. It is time for Gary's audiobook of the week. So you're hitting me.
One chance to get you back.
You're hitting me below the belt plenty of times, my friend.
Oh, and I hit you below the belt because I don't want to catch that.
Your audiobook. Okay, if you're new to the show, this is the time where I'll throw out an audiobook title for Gary, and I'll have to make up a quick topic and subject about it, and just give us a little selling points about the book here. So, Gary, this week, your book was going to be called, Working the Graveyard Shift, dealing with goblins and things like that, but not anymore, my friend. Your audiobook this week is called Tapping Out Jock Itch, How My Lifelong Battle with Jock Itch Has Played Out. And I'm just curious, this seems like a very personal thing, Gary, that I guess that now, because I'm in the pictures and Gary's writing a book about it, we both have a lot of experience with this. So, maybe take us, can you think of a time when you maybe couldn't train because of this, or what, how has this affected your time on the mats, Gary?
Well, it started, the first time I rolled with you,
Oh, man.
You have it really bad, and, we got in, I think it was the 50-50 position. And,
you're killing me.
It burns, so it's not fun. And, it can keep you off the mat. And I've tried just about everything, and that's what we talk about. I've taken cans of bleach and, just poured it there. And, boy, that didn't work out good. So the good thing is this book is going to tell you about my trials and tribulations, stuff not to do. Like the bad thing is, I've tried bleach, it itches, and next thing I know, I touch it, and next thing I know, I touch my forehead. And, so then I got jock itch on my head, and, it's not good. It's not good at all. You can see, just take a look at that picture of Byron and the thing, and it's not good at all. So, I've went through trials and tribulations to get rid of it, but what I found really works best is just go on down to your local drugstore and buy. The crazy thing is, they have athlete's foot spray, and they have jock itch spray. And it's like the same thing, except jock itch spray costs like 3 times as much.
Yeah.
I guess because not as many people get jock itch. So get yourself some athlete's foot spray. Spray it, keep it dry, and, change your, like we always talk about, don't forget to shower. Shower ASAP, and keep it dry, change your clothes.
You're telling me to spray it and then shower right away?
Well, actually, I would after I shower.
Okay, the spray stays
Yeah,
longer.
we don't want to wash the stuff off there. Put powder on there. Just use Gold Bond or regular powder. Actually, this is actually a true.
Here we go.
This actually isn't a joke audiobook for once. But I really did catch it from Byron. So, so I guess this is actually a real audiobook. Most of the time I'm making stuff up and trying to make it funny.
I just hope there's, unfortunately I did go back to the website here and I scrolled down to the picture because it has a little bit of advice of dealing with it and what to look for. And this picture's been over on my computer screen too long. But the black bar that's covering some of the areas, it probably could be a little bit bigger, I would say. So maybe don't even check that one out. You have kicked my butt thoroughly in this one.
Well, I don't know about your butt, more like your job.
Yeah, I don't know. At least if you have this, you could feel like you're an athlete, because you're an athletic person, you're a jock, and welcome to the world of being a jock. So that's one benefit of getting jock itch.
You're a jock, yep. But definitely chicks do not like it. So,
one more thing
don't
about
go around
that.
telling me.
When you're at the store buying that spray, probably not the best thing to buy and try to flirt with the person behind the counter. From my experience, less than 10% of the time will they actually flirt back at even a little bit when you're buying that sort of thing. So it's just not the right time. Go in there and buy something a little bit more normal, and that actually can help you out a little bit there. But
what I always do is I'll buy a bunch of food and just try to sneak that through real quick. So that'll work too.
There you go. Or one time I was buying, back when I was single, I buy a TV, microwave dinner, and a box of cereal or whatever. And this real pretty girl behind the counter was like, "Hey, you're single, aren't you?" And I kind of smiled and looked at her, and I was like, "Yeah, could you tell that because what I'm buying?" And she goes, "No, you're ugly." So kind of hurt there, Gary, but she was funny, and
But you want to know the crazy thing is, Byron told me that 2 years later she decided to try a jiu-jitsu class, and Byron choked her unconscious, so he got her back.
Oh, Gary, making me seem like a mean guy. I'm just an ugly guy.
Yeah,
just an ugly guy.
Well, yeah, with jock itch.
An itchy ugly guy, which generally doesn't help your looks anyway.
You ever thought about using that picture as your Facebook?
God. Like I was saying, they would probably send me in for that one because I know that you could report people who are put inappropriate pictures. That black box is not big enough to cover everything.
I think I'm going to change that to my profile picture today.
Well, Gary, hopefully your Facebook ban doesn't last too long, and we'll see you back when you get back on the Facebook, my friend.
Well, cool. I can't go wrong with that. Hey, speaking of Facebook ban, if I'm banned from Facebook, definitely check us out on social media. We're on YouTube. We're on Twitter, on Reddit. So check us out. Tell your friends about it, too.
All right. We appreciate all the support from Patreon supporters. If you're interested in helping this show out and helping us be able to grow and do a few more things that we are hoping to do, check us out. There's a link about Patreon in the show notes, and we appreciate all the support we have there. Also, we hope to bring back Matt Tail sometime pretty soon. So if you have a crazy story that happened to you that's jiu-jitsu related, type it up, send it our way. Also, type up your submissions for Coach of the Year. Next week, Gary, great news.
What do we got?
David Kirchmer, the grappling referee. This guy's refereed I think it's around 3,000 matches, and he's got some very high-profile matches and in white belt matches as well. He got the whole mix of anything you could imagine. Gi, no gi. He's refereed tons, and he's going to be talking to us about being a referee. Things that they do, and check out his website as well, thegrapplingreferee.com. And he's got some cool videos on there. But we'll be having him on next week, and a couple of a little bit controversial topics towards the end there that we're going to cover too. So look forward to bringing him next week.
Awesome. So stay tuned, my friends.
And if you're feeling
not stay tuned. Stay tuned. Don't forget to listen to us next week. Is what I meant to say.
Yeah, or the alternative would be to put this on replay and just listen to this until the next week shows up, and then you could just remain tuned. But that would be a terrible week.
That would be a terrible week.
Well, thanks for joining us for another week of the BJJ Brick Podcast. Stay sweaty, my friends.
And don't forget to shower. Make sure you dry off very well, and then spray yourself with Jockey spray or throw some powder down there when you're done.
Thank you for listening. I hope you find the time today to roll. After all, the best way to get better at Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu is to do Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu.